Hello and welcome. I'm Vaishali Kohli and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump says that his Ukraine peace proposal is not final. This comes as US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has left for Geneva to hold discussions on the Ukraine peace plan. French President Emmanuel Macron warns that the Ukraine plan needs deterrence. Meanwhile, United Kingdom's Prime Minister Keir Starmer stresses that Ukraine must decide matters affecting its own future. Israel says Hamas violated the Gaza ceasefire, sending a member into Israeli-held territory to attack its soldiers. In response, Israeli forces confirm they killed 5 senior Hamas members. Gaza Civil Defense says that Israeli airstrikes killed 21 people in Gaza after firing across the Yellow Line. This marks one of the deadliest days since the U.S. brokered ceasefire took place. According to reports, the U.S. is set to launch a new phase of operations targeting Venezuela as the Trump administration escalates pressure on Maduro. Reports also suggest that covert actions may lead with military forces deployed in the Caribbean. The White House accuses South Africa of weaponizing its G20 presidency, undermining the group's founding principles and refusing to facilitate a smooth transition of the G20 presidency to United States. A Houthi court in Yemen sentences 17 people to death for allegedly spying for Israel, the United States, and Saudi Arabia. The lawyer says defendants face execution by the firing squad but may appeal. At least 10 people died and around 20 were injured Saturday when a tourist bus overturned in Michoacán, Mexico. The bus had left Uruapan for Tlalpujahua. Authorities haven't yet determined the cause and investigations are ongoing. The United States has put forward a 28-point draft peace plan to end the war in Ukraine. According to the plan, Ukraine would have to recognize Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk as de facto Russian territory. Ukrainian forces would also withdraw from parts of the eastern Donetsk region they currently control, creating a demilitarized buffer zone, and front lines in Kherson and Zaporizhia would be frozen. U.S. President Donald Trump says that his Ukraine peace plan is not the final offer and they will have to end the war one way or another. Let's listen to what President Trump had to say.
Is this your final offer to Ukraine?
No, not my part. No, we'd like to get the peace. It should have happened a long time ago. The Ukraine war with Russia should have never happened. If I were president, it never would have happened. We're trying to get it ended. One way or the other, we have to get it ended.
Meanwhile, according to the U.S. State Department, Ukrainian and American officials, led by Marco Rubio, are going to meet in Geneva to discuss the Ukraine peace plan, and security officials from France, Britain, and Germany are also expected to join them in Geneva. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that the 28-point proposal for peace in Ukraine that emerged was authored by Washington and that it is based on inputs from the Russian side. But previous and ongoing inputs from Ukraine were also considered. However, U.S. lawmakers, including some in President Donald Trump's Republican Party, have criticized his plan for ending the war in Ukraine, which heeds to several hardline Russian demands. I have my guest joining me on the broadcast, Matthew Vadum, American journalist and author, and he's joining me from Washington, D.C. Now, Matthew, of course, President Trump has said that this isn't the final peace plan. What would you like to say?
it probably isn't the final peace plan. Diplomacy is sometimes messy, and proposals and white papers and trial balloons get floated all the time in the negotiation process. So I wouldn't be surprised to learn that this is not the final version of what the United States is proposing. The whole idea of Secretary of State Rubio flying to Geneva, Switzerland, is to actually talk to other parties and try to negotiate a deal. So, yeah, it may not be the final version.
Matthew, now there are a lot of reports that have been coming in about the fact that President Trump's peace plan, and I quote, is a little controversial. What are the kind of reactions that are coming in the U.S.?
Well, in the United States Congress, some people are skeptical of the plan. There's some people who are pro-Ukraine hardliners who don't think that the United States should be encouraging Ukraine to effectively cede its territory that has been captured by Russia by recognizing Russia's de facto control of those territories. So, it's not entirely positive, but there's another segment in Congress that does want peace. But these things are always, as I said earlier, these things are always very messy, and trying to get 100 United States senators to agree on anything is not an easy task. So they have a lot of sway in the process, although it's ultimately up to President Trump to decide what foreign policy he wishes the United States government to pursue. So it strikes me as a fluid situation where the details and the facts, where the details of the plan could change at any time. Does this mean that peace is around the corner in Ukraine, that the war with Russia is suddenly going to end? I doubt it. These things take a long time to work out.
And Matthew, interestingly, hours after Putin's speech is when Trump has made a little bit of a surprise U-turn when it comes to the Ukraine peace plan. So what would you like to say on that one?
Well, that's a really open-ended question. President Trump alternates between, he's a mercurial figure, and he alternates between wanting a peace deal immediately and wanting to, at least in recent months, pressure Ukraine to give in to some of Russia's demands. So right now it appears that President Trump wants a peace deal to be hammered out, but he's not afraid to needle Ukraine and to press Ukraine, which he seems to think is dragging its heels on reaching a peaceful settlement of the hostile conflict over there.
And Matthew, my final question to you on this would be that, previously we've seen that the communication between Zelensky and Trump has always been a little strained. So do you think that gets better with time now?
I think that their relations between the two were certainly at a low point several weeks ago, but it seems that the relationship between President Zelensky and President Trump has been improving, even if only slightly, in recent months. And I think that President Zelensky has shown some inclination to want a deal to go through, and he's even offered to not stay in office as president of the Ukraine if the deal goes through. So I think that, as I was saying earlier, I think it's a very fluid situation, and anything could happen in Geneva. And but I wouldn't hold out hope for, a miracle settlement to suddenly be reached over in Switzerland, because the two sides are dug in, Russia and Ukraine, and Ukraine doesn't want to cede its territory that was already captured by Russia, and Russia under President Vladimir Putin continues to want to pursue an aggressive policy and thinks of Ukraine as historically part of part of Greater Russia. It was part of the Russian Empire before. It was part of the Soviet Union before. Russia doesn't want to give it up easily, and I don't think it will. So we'll have. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have any predictions as to what is going to happen in Switzerland.
All right, Matthew, I'd request you to stay on with me. I'll come back to you. Now, European and other Western leaders, while criticizing the U.S. proposed peace plan, emphasize that it is a basis for talks to end the Russia-Ukraine war. But it still needs additional work to eke out a better deal for Kyiv before a Thursday deadline. French President Emmanuel Macron says that Russia would betray its promise and come back if Ukraine is forced to reduce its army. As proposed under Donald Trump's plan, the French president was among European leaders meeting at the G20 summit in South Africa, who have pushed back at the one-sided plan by Trump that aims to end the war in Ukraine. Let's listen to what President Macron had to say.
On voit bien qu'il y a des éléments sur la limitation du format de l'armée ukrainienne, donc de sa propre souveraineté. On sait que s'il n'y a pas les éléments de la dissuasion, les Russes reviendront et trahiront leurs promesses. Nous l'avons vu à plusieurs reprises, et en particulier en ce qui concerne l'Ukraine en février 2022. Donc nous voulons la paix. Je pense qu'elle doit commencer par un cessez-le-feu. Et ça aussi, c'est des choses qu'on peut essayer d'avoir à court terme. Je constate que depuis mars, où le président Zelensky a donné son accord sur le cessez-le-feu, c'est la Russie qui a toujours dit non.
Now, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer also emphasized the importance of a just and lasting peace, stressing that matters for Ukraine are always to be determined by Ukraine. Meanwhile, leaders of 8 Nordic and Baltic nations have pledged to continue supplying arms to Ukraine and express support for solutions that respect Ukraine's sovereignty, aiming for greater security and stability in Europe. I have my guest, Matthew Vadum, American journalist and author, joining me from Washington, D.C., back on the broadcast with me. Now, Matthew, as we're telling our viewers, there's a lot of criticism already coming in for Trump's peace plan.
Right, and a lot of the criticism has been among, pro-Ukraine supporters in the United States Congress, and there are quite a lot of them. And French President Emmanuel Macron has indicated he doesn't trust Russia to honor any agreement that it may reach. So there are a lot of people who are dubious about the peace plan as it stands right now. So a lot of people are pushing back against it, and it'll be interesting to see what Secretary Rubio does at the talks in Switzerland.
And Matthew, now, of course, French President Emmanuel Macron has clearly said that Russia would betray its promise, because that's also, they also take a very strong-headed stand on things. So what would you like to say on that one?
Whether Russia can be trusted?
Yes.
No, I think the President Macron of France is probably right there. I don't think that Russia can be trusted, and I don't think at all. They started this war, and they are doing everything in their power to hang on to the territory that they seized through military conquest in Ukraine. So I think President Emmanuel Macron of France is making a good point that Russia cannot be trusted. Maybe there will have to be safeguards put in place to ensure that Russia adheres to whatever agreement is reached. And I'm not sure what those safeguards would be to ensure Russian compliance. But I'm sure that's going to be discussed by Secretary Rubio in Geneva. They may have to get creative because I think President Macron is absolutely right. Russia cannot be trusted.
Appreciate your joining me on the broadcast, Matthew. Thank you for your time. And now, well, Ukraine has said that it has received 31 civilians who had been freed from jail in Belarus. Kyiv's Prisoner Exchange Coordination Committee has stated that women and men detained in Belarus and sentenced for various terms of imprisonment ranging from 2 to 11 years are returning to Ukraine. It has said that Kyiv expresses their gratitude to the United States of America and President Donald Trump for their fruitful work in returning Ukrainian civilians and military personnel from Belarus and Russia. Meanwhile, the head of the Secretariat of the Coordination Headquarters for the Treatment of Prisoners of War and a Ukrainian civilian have responded. Let's listen in.
Ми щиро вдячні Сполученим Штатам Америки, зокрема президенту Америки Дональду Трампу, його спецпредставнику в Білорусі Джону Келлогу і, відповідно, також Крістоферу Сміту за ту допомогу, яка була надана в нашій роботі.
Саме, що нічого допомагає Україні, що він спілкується по-українськи, знала, що він на стороні України. Я розуміла, чим це може закінчитись, тому що я чула висадки писали плакати і буквально не зійшла.
I now have my guest, Daniela Bloom, political commentator, who's joining me from Los Angeles in California. Daniela, I want your opening comments on what we're just reporting to our viewers about Ukraine, who has said that it has received 31 civilians who had been freed from jail in Belarus and is, of course, thankful to President Trump for it.
I think it's wonderful. I appreciate how the Ukrainians felt. This is how the Israelis felt just several weeks ago when their hostages have been returned. I think this is a good sign that Belarus is making in good faith. The sanctions have taken a toll. They understand that with the Trump administration, there's a new sheriff in town, as we say. Peace through leverage, peace through strength. Belarus did nothing under the Biden administration. It did nothing under the Obama administration. But with Trump, they do not want to become collateral damage. And Putin is watching.
All right, Daniela, now we're of course talking about these civilians who've been freed, but we were also previously talking about the peace plan, and that's a lot in the limelight at the moment. So what would you like to say on that?
Again, Trump is moving the needle where no one else could, and war is fatiguing. Ukrainians are exhausted. Russia is being stretched, and Belarus's economy is in the toilet. And Europe is also overwhelmed with its immigration crisis and its energy crisis. A lot of people can have opinions, but if that does not result in action, it doesn't matter. And Trump, given his record, does nearly the impossible. He is not conventional. He doesn't focus on diplomacy. He focuses on getting the deal done. And I am encouraged. When Trump was asked when he was running before 2020, whose side he was on, Russia or Ukraine, which was a ridiculous question in itself. But his answer was very telling. He said, I just want everyone to stop dying. Trump is not a war hawk. He doesn't like war. He doesn't like people dying on any sides. And if he can broker peace, and I know that he's been frustrated with Putin and Zelensky, that they have not come to the table, and Belarus is trying to do what they need to do to get under his good graces. And Putin and Zelensky do respect Trump. So I am encouraged.
Daniela, I request you to stay on with me. I'll come back to you. Now, according to U.S. officials, the United States is weighing new actions against Venezuela, including options to overthrow President Nicolas Maduro. Covert operations could be the first step, though timing and scope remain unclear. Washington has deployed an aircraft carrier strike group, warships, and F-35s to the Caribbean amid rising concerns over drug trafficking. The U.S. plans to designate the Cartel de los Soles a foreign terrorist organization, accusing Maduro of leading it. However, Maduro has denied any links to drugs and says differences with Washington should be resolved through diplomacy. Meanwhile, airlines are canceling flights after the FAA warned of heightened military activity in Venezuelan airspace. And I, of course, have my guest Daniela Bloom, political commentator, joining me from Los Angeles in California. Daniela, how do you see this?
I think when commercial airlines pull away from a country's coastline, it's pretty serious. It's sending a message. And Trump is sending a message. With Maduro, I mean, he's one to talk about diplomacy when he has been so corrupt with his own leadership. Trump has every right to protect U.S. interests. It is a known fact that Venezuela has ties to Iran, to Russia, to China. There's Hezbollah cells in Latin America. These are all U.S. adversaries. And Trump is not going to wait for a problem to act. He's going to be proactive, and it's working.
Daniela, now this is, of course, regarding drug trafficking. Would you be able to explain to our viewers how much of a concern this really is in the United States?
It's a great concern. We've had a fentanyl crisis for the last several years, whether it's through ships or illegal immigration, and these numbers cannot be ignored. Trump has secured the borders. He has zero tolerance, especially if you're an illegal alien who's committed a crime. And this is why he was voted into office. We want strength again. We want to be taken seriously. We've been taken advantage of for far too long. And we have our citizens and our children to think of. So from Iran to China to Russia to Hezbollah to the real drug cartel crisis, it's more than enough for Trump to flex his muscles and ensure that Maduro step in line.
And Daniela, my final question to you is that the U.S. is, of course, weighing its options when it comes to overthrowing President Nicolas Maduro. How do you see that?
Well, we will see what happens. Trump will negotiate with everyone, from Kim Jong-un to Xi Jinping to Qatar, and most recently, our mayor, our newly elected communist mayor of New York, Mamdani, and Zohan Mamdani. So if Trump, his motivation is to get a deal done that benefits the U.S. and its citizens. And he is willing to sit down with Maduro if Maduro will sit down and be serious about being accountable. But if he is not accountable, Trump will be weighing his options.
Thank you, Daniela, for joining me on the broadcast. And now at least 10 people were killed and dozens injured after a tourist bus overturned in western Mexico's Michoacán state. The bus was traveling from Uruapan to Tlalpujahua while the accident occurred. Authorities have dispatched investigators and forensic teams to the accident site. The cause of the crash remains unclear. Traffic accidents remain a leading cause of death in Mexico, with nearly 375,000 crashes reported nationwide in 2024, causing over 4,600 fatalities. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news and updates from around the world.